great to see you, brother.
Yeah, it's profound, and I'm scared shitless. But I think it's a very important question for me and for everybody who is feeling life. Okay, I was approaching my 80th birthday about 5-6 weeks ago. Celebrated 3 weeks ago, and questions came up about my life. What have I accomplished? What's still there to do? And in what's still there to do, there is one very important question that sort of came when I was in my teens. I've only talked to 2 people about this in my life and heard about one on the radio. The 2 people are my older brother and my cousin. They talked about this once. And I had this experience as a teenager to go into the feeling of, how long is eternity? And you'd go into this panic. And I did that until I noticed that this is no use. There's nothing come of this. And so I have managed to postpone this theme now for about 60 years or more. And now I see that your lectures are coming to a head every time more intense, and they're sort of, for me, pointing to this, for me, profound question, what happens, not that we die, the first shock of existence, and not the second shock of existence, but the shock of non-existence, in eternity.
Yeah.
And beautiful. I think that sort of is very shaming too.
Yeah.
Full of shame, that stuff. I mean,
yeah.
And I'm looking for an answer, either on an intellectual level, what is time, or do the quantum people have an answer that there is no time, it's all happening at one moment, or whatever there is. Anyway, this question is burning under my nails, and I don't have that much time, and I would like to get a half-decent answer from the universe, from somewhere.
No pressure.
Your answers are so profound, so I'm putting a little hope in you. Maybe you have a kind of allude to the solution.
Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful to see you. It's beautiful to see you. And of course, it's a beautiful, beautiful inquiry, and it's the inquiry of 80, and it's, if we're wise, it's the inquiry of 50 and 40 and 30 and 60 and 70, right? It's the inquiry. And, I'm not going to talk about, the space-time continuum or, the various approaches to time, which is an enormously important issue, right? And the different people who think that the space-time continuum is collapsing in the last 10 years in physics, and I'm going to leave all that aside. I want to just maybe, if I can, brother, just to talk simply about what it means to die, right? Because none of us is going to walk out of the story alive, right? There's not one person here that's going to walk out of the story alive. It's a big deal, all right? And Utz brings it to the fore and puts it in the center of the room. And so I can, with your permission, I want to just chat about that a little bit, just a little bit, okay? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And there's an old chant that a friend of Shimon and mine, Shefa, right? Shefa Golden. Remember, she came to join us for a weekend, right? It was 2004 or 5. And the chant went something like, I'm not going to sing it, but I'll just give you the chant. It was something like, we are resting in this divine embrace, in this timeless time and placeless place. We are resting in this divine embrace, in this timeless time and placeless place. And it's a rough translation of a verse in the Song of Songs. And what it really means is that eternity is not a very long time. Right? Eternity is actually immediately present right beneath time. So stay with me for a second. Do you remember that moment, I don't remember what day it was, when we went into a very deep silence? It was the end of Don't Look Up, I think that day. Do you remember that silence? Who can remember that silence? Who can access that silence? Right? So that silence participated, right, in a quality of eternity. That's a quality of eternity. And that quality is available, and it transcends our physical apparatus. Now, I want to say something, Utsen. I'm going to ask you, in this case, we're not going to do a conversation here, although it's a very big conversation that you and I can have. But we'll just kind of see if we can just kind of swallow and kind of feel into this and swallow this possibility. And I can, with permission, want to do something kind of dramatic, which is 1,000 years ago, we had a very small group of realizers, people who had a realization, realizers as a verb, right, who actually had a direct experience of eternity, right, and who had actually walked through the valley of death and actually had direct contact with this timeless time and this spaceless space, right? What's happened is that group of realizers has expanded, and our information has expanded. And it's too big of a topic to talk about now, but if you actually gather the information, right, that's available today about death, it's very, very clear to us for the first time in human history, right, based on an enormous amount, really 3 different kinds of information. Kind of a very rigorous philosophical information, an enormous amount of empirical information, meaning reports from different fields, right, including the fields of parapsychology, the fields of reincarnation, right, the fields of clairvoyance, right, the fields of, right, clairsentience, right, the fields of, right, there's an intense investigation that's gone on that's never happened in human history before over the last 150 years of extremely rigorous investigation in a narrow band of human consciousness that's investigated death empirically. Now, anyone who's going to tell you that this is exactly what happens, you should probably walk out of the room fast. We don't know exactly what happens, but what we do know is, right, there's a weight of information that tells us, and there's a third kind of information. So there's philosophical, there's empirical, and then there's anthro-ontological. And we can actually chart 12 different doors, and maybe we should do, maybe next time we should do an entire week, on death, right? Just on death in that whole world, right? But we actually know anthro-ontologically, meaning in our bodies, we can access 12 portals that live in our bodies, heart, and souls that tell us that it's not over when it's over, meaning that there's a dimension of eternity that transcends what we experience here as the flow of time. And all 3 of those together, I actually think give us direct and clear information, right, that death is a night between 2 days, and that we're in the flow of the allurement of an unfolding eternity. Now, how long eternity is, what is, right, that's all, right, how long eternity is makes no sense, because that would mean that eternity is time. Right? Wittgenstein got it right. Right? Eternity is not everlasting time. Eternity is beneath time. Right? The timeless time, right? The spaceless, right? It's that. And so, and I know this is not what you asked exactly, right? But with permission, if I could say to you the same thing I say to me, and the same thing I say to literally KK, right? A young man came to visit, right? Came to visit us in New York, right? The day that we were leaving, and his mother, right, was dying. He just texted me now that she just passed, right? And I'm gonna call him afterwards, I think we actually get to look at death and know very, very clearly that death is a portal. And so really the question is, how do I stand at that portal and be fearless? And it's, what does it mean to have a good death? Right? Which I want to have a good death. Right? I want you to have a good death. I want you to have a good death. I want us all to have a good death. What does it mean to have a good death? So the only way I think to have a good death, right, is to know that you've lived. And the great news about that is it's not dependent on yesterday. And it's what we actually understand in the interior science is no matter what's happened in your life until now, we actually have the capacity through an act of will and intention to actually transform anything that exists. And there's no, and this is where the time issue is really important. And this is where I'm going to spend a minute, and then we'll go to the next question. We won't spend the night on it, although we could, but we'll just spend a minute on it. So the biggest thing missing in society today, Western and East, is how do you deal with the moments that have passed that you can't change, right? I mean, that's hard, right? The shit you can't change. You can't undo because there's a linear movement of time. And that question is crushing to people. And if you actually want to find the malaise, that's a crushing question because there's no one who doesn't have some moment that they want undone. And then you can't undo it. And it's devastating. But we actually can. Right? And I would say one of the most important, it's another thing we should spend a week on, right? But one of the most important realizations of the interior science is something they call teshuvah, T-E-S-H-U-V-A, which means that time has both a linear dimension, it actually is moving forward, history is real, there's an evolutionary spiral, but there's also a circular dimension to time, which means that if in your mind heart you place your attention on a quality of time, you can actually access that quality of time quite literally again. That time actually comes up. So if you find a particular moment where there was a particular set of events or a particular unfolding, you can actually access that in your heart, mind, body. You then return to that moment in time, and you literally rewrite the story with your will, your ratzon. And will, ratzon, right, ratzon means eros. Right, it's the first chapter of the Song of Solomon. Mashcheni acharecha narutza. Right, let me run after you. Roots, run after you. It's an eros word. So will is not intellect. Will is the eros flowing in me. So if I re-enter that moment and reconfigure my will, which is my relationship, and I reenact that moment for real in my heart, body, mind, so literally, phenomenologically, ontologically, meaning for fucking real, the moment changes. So there's actually no moment which actually lives in the past. That's actually the key. Right? There's no moment that actually ontologically, right, is relegated to the past. That's a shocking idea. Right? I mean, it's so radically hopeful, right? So radically beautiful that I can actually go back, and again, we should spend a morning, a day, a week, at actually going back, each of us, to those particular moments and literally reconfiguring their eros by reconfiguring my relationship to it. And I would invite myself, and I'd invite you, brother Utz, and I invite all of us, because, right, dear friends, we have no idea when the story's over. We have no idea whether I'm going to pass first or Utz will pass first. We have absolutely no clue. And to actually realize that I can actually fall asleep at night knowing that I could die at any moment and I've lived well, and anything I don't feel I've lived well, and I've actually reconfigured so I've lived it well that way. It's my will. That's a very powerful, gorgeous understanding. So eternity, full circle, and then we end. Eternity is actually right here. Right? Eternity is right here, right now, which is what allows me to get beneath the moment, to actually step into return to the past and to reconfigure it. So just with permission, I give myself and you and all of us a blessing that we die fearlessly. Right? We die fearlessly. Right? And Jung wasn't wrong, by the way, last sentence. Jung wasn't wrong where he said you cannot accomplish any kind of gentle mental stability unless you have direct access, right, to some realization of immortality beyond death. Because let's just be clear, right? If this is a short end game, right, which is over when it's over, the game makes absolutely no sense on multiple counts, which is one of the reasons we know that that's not its nature. But let's hold it there. And I think that requires a very major, right, and serious, and thank you.
Thank you for the contribution.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Gets me a bit further.
A bit further is good.
Thank you.
A bit further is good. L'chaim! L'chaim to Utz. Give him this is a to life to Utz. L'chaim to life.
Thank you all.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
But you got to drink it up.